All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the stream. We're starting out with an error this morning. There are a couple of things I wanted to go over, but I updated, and now we're getting this field tree string is not assignable to type field tree unknown string or number, which is strange because if they flipped this around, I would understand it, but field tree string. So it's saying that field tree string is not assignable to type symbol iterator string, field tree never string any. And that's a bit strange. So it wants a function that's a symbol iterator, and then an iterator string with a field tree never string. The issue here is we're using the app input instead of the projected input. Everything else here is working, so it's specific to our app input. And the difference between our app input and, say, everything else has a form value control. Our input, when we look at it, is just a class that we've attached a field to. And so we've got some strangeness going on here. And if we go back to our signal forms examples, what have we done? So it's our custom form control here. They're implementing form value control again. Do we have Spartan UI? And I've got some old stuff in here. Storybook, don't need it. NX, probably don't need it. Oh, this is the attributes, the organize attribute stuff, organize import stuff. That's our Daisy, that's our Tailwind. More NX stuff here. What I'm looking for is I'm trying to remember the Angular Architects article that we used to get this to work. Mutative navigation with routing with immutable state, Angular primitives. That's the debounce stuff I want to take a look at. That's the stream fixes I want to do. Form UI control. Is this the one we were using? So we're injecting the store. So our first signal form, there's that. And then validators into functions, showing validation errors, using separate schemas, conditional validation, multi-field validators. Async validators, HTTP, nested forms and form groups. Form arrays, subforms, custom fields. So this is the classical one here, right? Where we're implementing form value control. We've got our model, our inputs. Where do we... Where do we pass this in? What was it called before? It was called tree. I'm just trying to figure out. So this is our flight edit component. We've got our form, but we aren't passing anything through. So here we're passing through the flight form.form, but it's typical input. Validators into functions. There was something here. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Johanterson's here on his Johalternate. Welcome to the stream, man. It's good to see you. Right now, I'm trying to figure out this error. Where we're passing through. That's debounce. That's that. It's like our custom form control here it's the same one that they're using in that example. It's a classic form value control. Yeah, it's well, and I mean, I'm just happy you're here, man. I appreciate you being here. I understand life gets busy, especially around this time of year, right? When we've got holidays all over the world just going on right now. From now until after the new year, everybody's busy with all sorts of stuff. So we're good. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna get frustrated here. What I am curious about is what I broke, because it's broken on a piece that's that we created, right? And I'm not sure what broke. That's the tough part here. Read-only fields and like this custom aggregate property. Form.password and warnings. Oh, it does not make the form invalid. Interesting. We'll have to take a look at some of this stuff too. But what I'm not sure about is what's going on here with the field tree string. Because we've got our input class, and I can't implement the, hey, Oleg, you haven't missed anything. You've missed me trying to figure out why I'm getting this error. So in our to-do, we've got this app input, and we've bound it to the form.description. I mean, the way we could get around it is we could go and do a projected input. Oh yeah, yeah, we can absolutely comment this out, right? So if we take this out, it will compile. And so now we're serving. It is complaining that we've got input, but we aren't using it here in our imports array. But now that we've taken that out, we can go back and we can take a look and see. Now we've got, what did we comment out? Oh, we probably need to refresh this. Wait, there we go. So we lost our description. And everything else seems to be okay. This is weird. Okay. So it's definitely something to do with this app input. And specifically the form description. And the form description, if we go take a look at our model, have we done anything to that description that might break this? So once we add this back, we've got an issue, right? If we turn it into a projected input, so say we comment this out and we turn this into a projected input and we give it our class equals, and we want call span 5. There we go. And here we go with form description. And we go with form description is invalid. Our label becomes description. And our placeholder becomes describe your task. Right, so we've commented out the top one. We've added this one back in. And now we're in a good place, right? Oh, interesting. We're not getting our errors. Oh, wait, what? Do you see that? Oh, we've got some more, oh, here, description. There we go. So now our form behaves as expected. However, if we comment this one out and we put this one back in its place, we've got something going on here. And that's immediately causing this issue. And so I think it has to do with the way we're passing this through. So our field is an input required, and we're saying it has to be a field tree string. What if I add the other string here? Does that work? So it's not assignable to type field tree unknown string or number. So this field comes in as a signal. And when I try to make this not a signal, right, we get an error here. I'm curious. Field state string string is not assignable to type the function that returns a field state string string or number. Type field state string string provides no match for signature. Field state string or no. Oh, is that giving us the idea of what the problem is here? What if this becomes field state? Does that solve our issue? No, field state has no call signatures. So this becomes a bigger problem. So it's definitely field tree. So that makes this all work. It's the binding here that's the problem. As soon as we fix that piece, well, we still had the issue. Field state string string or number is not assignable. It's still giving us field tree string string is not assignable to type field tree unknown string or number. Oh, it's going backwards. Is that the case? So form description is string string. Is field state string string an object? Field tree an unknown object. Is this broken because form value control, UI control? What are we missing here? No, that's not it either. So is it form value control? And then it's going to want me to, like, this doesn't work either. Oh man, no, that's not what we wanted. Also, it needs to be extends, not implements. And that way it'll tell us. Is it? Am I wrong here? Oh, it's implements. And what it wants is a value. That's because, like, if I take this out, it's gonna break everything here. But this binding is obviously not working. So I guess the other thing, yeah, and now we're getting this. So the other question could be, let's go back. We'll take a look at debounce here in a second. But in the change log for RC2, support host argument. Oh, this is good. This one's really good. Yeah, this one's really good because it used to be that if we did value as a model that was required, then it would flag that as not being set. But this fixes that. Make field detection logic more robust. Field interface conformance. I wonder if we're getting caught out in currently logic for detecting field directives only works if it's imported from Angular Forms signals, which doesn't cover our own tests. Oh, fascinating. Use any when checking field interface conformance. Switches to checking against form value control any instead of form value control unknown when checking whether custom controls conform to the interface. I think this is where we're getting caught out. So yeah, it should not report a custom control that conforms to the form value control. It should report unsupported property bindings on a field. User control is not assignable to type form value control unknown. Form value control any. They changed it to any. Types of required signal are incompatible between these types. I think these are the errors that we're getting hit with. Yeah, I think we're getting hit with this. I don't I think I need to do some more investigation to figure this out. This should work. But this binding, this is weird because this binding, so it's picking up this binding as being, see, it should be a signal. And if I make this field tree any, which is something that I tried before, then we get field tree string is not assignable to this, which means that it's not even. You know what? Let's try something here. Let's turn this back into a field tree string. But instead of calling this field, let's call this control. And up here, oh, that's why it works, because I am grabbing it from the signal. So now we're a field tree. So now if we go back here and we bind to control, does everything work? That would validate, oh, look at that. Yes, it does. Dang it. Oh, I hate that that works. That's our debounce stuff. And the reason that I hate that that works is that, oh, hey, I missed a whole bunch. It seems to me that form.description is not field tree. I missed your comment, yo alternate. Oh, that's interesting. So when it's passing the stuff through to the multi-stream, it's missing a bunch of stuff because you're adding string. And you're not wrong. And what we were trying to do to detect this was not wrong either. This issue comes down to the check that it's doing. So the check it's doing in the past was less strict. They've added in a much more strict type check on the field input specifically. So the issue wasn't that we were doing it wrong. And we can even see that it still works, right? Like if I take this out, we now get the same issues. We can see up here that we're getting the proper errors and everything like that. and test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our errors are gone up top, our errors are gone here. So we know that this is working. The problem really came down to that this being called field triggers extra checks on Angular's side when it does this binding. So the Angular compiler does extra checks. And yes, technically we weren't conforming to the interface. The error wasn't helpful because the error was basically telling us, hey, you don't conform to the interface. Well, yeah, we don't conform to the interface because we haven't explicitly we haven't explicitly implemented the interface. Man, I'm not sure how I feel about that one because it kind of breaks this pattern. I really liked this pattern where we could create a wrapper that added field set and all sorts of stuff and still use field as the binding here. And in fact, we no longer need this dot control. Now we can just say control because we aren't using the value from here. But this makes this input different from every other input here. And because this binding makes this different, man, it requires some overhead, right? I mean, obviously, if I try to bind a field here, it's going to complain and say field doesn't exist. Well, it's not even going to complain about that. But yeah. Might it be that the field directive applies to all elements? So this worked before, right? And the field directive does apply to, so anytime you do this field binding, you're going to get this issue. Because this is a special directive that Angular added. And that might be the problem. Like we're trying to pass this field straight through. And we're trying to reuse the name field. And that's what's breaking our binding. Let's take this out. That's what I was just going to go back to that if it didn't work. Right, and the form name here, this binding will no longer work. And I see why. There's some magic that happens when you do the field binding. It binds to more than just the field. Like when we were talking last week about like disabled and stuff like that. It becomes a problem. Really, I should rename this. It shouldn't be control. I should rename this to be field tree. And as soon as I rename this to be field tree, it's going to work and it's going to communicate what it is. It's better. Oh, app input. Wait, did it not save this? There's that. Okay. So the rename caused the compile to go out of order a bit. But by calling it field tree, it's going to communicate better what it is. That's something I can get behind. I would love to be able to use field still, but I understand why they don't want you to use field. So they made field a pass-through so components can have its own input named to that. Can you explain a little bit more about that, Michael? I'm curious about that. I gave you a ban for 100 eons. Man, you can't ban Johanderson. He's a good guy. Um, anyway, I understand why. There's some magic that happens here. We used to be able to pass this through. The directive won't hijack an input named field. I mean, that's the way it was in the past, right? And if we put this back to field, and we're gonna have to add our this here, this dot field, right? And then we go back here and we save this. The issue we're running into is the change that they made to detect that interface. So field tree string is not assignable to type field tree unknown string or number. It's breaking here. My assumption is that the pass through is broken for whatever reason. And maybe there's not some unit tests around that pass through. Right. I don't know if it's intentional either. It might be, it might not be. I don't know if there were tests that didn't catch it. But I'm going to assume that it's not intentional. And it was just missed. I'm going to leave this there, and that's all good. Because as soon as I rename it to not be field, it seems like specifically that error goes away and it goes back to behaving the way it did before. And the only thing that I can chalk it up to is one of these two. So either this one or this one. So the field detection, the current logic for detecting field directives only works when it's imported from Angular form signals, which doesn't cover our own tests. But I don't like, if meta name does not equal field, return false. Oh. It might be this check here. Right, like there might be something broken with either this addition so there might be something broken there. It's very, very possible because we're specifically checking for the field there. But this one also use any when checking field interface conformance. And the messages we're getting. See, look at this. Our app has a form signal this. So this one, value model. So it shouldn't it says it shouldn't report one that conforms to that, but it should report unsupported property bindings on a field. And we're getting errors of this format, and then the sub error corresponds to this format. So I mean, these are the format of the errors that we're getting that they're checking in their own tests, right? Field tree, this is not assignable to this, and then field tree is not assignable to symbol iterator this, right? So I think those are our two issues here. One of those two changes probably unintentionally broke it. So yeah, I shouldn't go too heavy on it because I do think the breakage is unintentional. But for now, if you guys, one thing to be very, very clear about in this case, right? Before we say too much about it, we're using an experimental branch. That specifically means that things can break, things can change, right? And so we are intentionally exposing ourselves to this kind of weirdness and errors. And the error message wasn't helpful, but again, experimental code. We don't expect the error message to be super helpful when we're in an experimental state. I do expect something to probably change between now and next week, or, well, in the US, we're, no, we're not. It's like in the US, we're heading into the Thanksgiving holiday. We're not. I'm thinking Thanksgiving because I had to get up early this morning. I had to book a flight on Southwest. I'm flying out to an on-site in North Carolina this week. And so I had to get up to click a button on the Southwest website so that I'm not, the last person boarding the plane. And because I'm traveling next week, my brain is thinking Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving isn't for 2 weeks, so never mind. Between now and next week, they may get enough feedback that they fixed the bug. Who knows? I'm not, or it may not even be a bug. It might be intentional, because there is some special stuff that happens. But to Michael's point, field was a pass through. So when it didn't implement that interface, it was supposed to be a pass-through. So maybe something changed. I don't know. But we're gonna leave it at that. I want to talk about some other stuff that seems fairly interesting. So let's get back into that. First of all, let's talk about the code review from last week. So in input.ts on line 41, oh, I've got commented out code. Input.ts on line 41, commented out code. Yes. And this goes back to last week. The way I was doing disabled was wrong. And we talked through that a bunch, right? Now we know that you don't bind to disabled and control disabled. Instead, in our model, that's our list model. In our model, what we did instead was we added some disabled stuff. And that works just fine. because now we can just say, you know, when form.done is checked, then we disable our code, right? And if we go back, we can validate that this works because this stuff is all disabled. None of it works. As soon as we uncheck it, everything goes back to being editable. And so it's the proper way to handle in signal forms instead of binding to disabled. So that's a good call out to remove that code. The other, like we've got a whole bunch of commented out code here. So let's go ahead and fix that up. The other thing it says is it's calling out this array any, and we talked about this last week. And yeah, it's saying we're sacrificing type safety, which I agree with. It's saying that we could go with a form control any array. So let's give that a shot. So here, instead of array any, we could go form control any and turn this into an array. Bring this in from Angular Forms. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Did I bring it in from the wrong place? Nope. Yeah. Is it form state? Form control state? I mean, we can go back to our array of any. Is there, and like it keeps telling me to use never, but that's bad. And if we try to use unknown, then down here we have to make sure, so disabled takes in a path kind. And if we go with field tree here, field tree any, it doesn't work either. So for right now, an array of any is probably what we should do. When using this, I actually prefer the syntax. In most cases, I prefer the simpler syntax, but for this, I prefer array any, the generic array. And the reason for that is that it's different from the way I typically write code, so it looks intentional. Beach party at a lake. Oh, wow. The V21 beach party at Johanderson's lake. I didn't realize Johanderson had a lake. That sounds awesome. Thanks for the invite, Johanderson. I'm looking forward to being there. But yeah, no, and you're saying maybe schema path tree. So we can try that. Maybe schema path tree. And that doesn't look generic. What is going on here? Oh, I do have to add a generic argument. Does that work? And now it doesn't like this. So if we take off the maybe and import that, still nothing. It just doesn't like that for whatever reason. But if we just call it, hey, it's an array of any, the problem here is that I can put anything in here, right? Like Johanderson Lake Party, right? And it doesn't care. That's the problem that we've got here, is that so, oh man, the other way we could go about this is to go schema path, boom. And here we could do number or string. And then we could do one, and then it's path kind.child. Array. And that fixes it. But if I change the, like I could do schema path unknown here now. And it's fine with that. But as soon as I take off these parts, oh, nope, now it doesn't care about that either. Okay. And now if I do Johanderson Lake Party, it doesn't allow it. So that's a much better, like we could do a schema path unknown, because I think disabled takes in a schema path. So that works. It shouldn't support invite string to a very exclusive party. Exactly, Michael. Exactly. We can't we can't have an invite to a very exclusive party show up in our code just randomly. We don't want random code showing up to a party. So that fixes that. Array any is often a dangerous choice for the exact reason that we showed. With this, now we can at least say, hey, you have to be a schema path, right? Form ID. The other thing is that now we should get like IntelliSense here. So that's good to have in place. And that's a good call out by Gemini. The form control doesn't work, but that's okay. You know, sometimes, when we're reviewing code, we make suggestions that don't necessarily work. In this case, it didn't work, but that's okay. We figured out what works, and now we've solutioned for our fixes. So let's go ahead and commit some code. So we've got so we've got a bunch of changes here. I don't want to defer, but I think we're gonna have to take it. It doesn't do anything, so whatevs. So let's go ahead and commit this. So there we go. And then this one, we're going to commit this. And eventually I'm going to run out of free AI, but until I do, it can write my commit messages. I don't care. So there we go. We push that. And we've solved that issue. Now the next piece I wanted to talk about is this this debounce rule. So debounce introduces an interesting piece, and this may be part of the reason that, I don't know, I'm not going to speculate here, but debounce adds a rule that allows developers to control when changes to a form controller synchronize to the form model. So there are two now changes to field state. Value is actually the debounced value. Control value is the current value of the form. And so we're going to experiment with this here a little bit in a second. But the idea is that you can apply debounce rules to your control values. This is going to be helpful when, maybe you're making an HTTP call or things like that, where the validation might be expensive. If somebody's typing in a username and you check that username against like an HTTP, call or something, you don't want every key up to make that happen. So they're applying a debounce rule. And debounce rule essentially manages when changes to control value are synchronized to value. And so value, you can rely on value to be the debounced value. If you need the actual form control value, you can grab the control value. And if you update value directly, then control value gets updated and it cancels any pending debounce updates. And then, multiple debounce rules are applied to the same field. The last currently active rule is used to debounce and update. Basically, this means if I go debounce, 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 then it's probably just the last one that's going to fire. We'll need to look at the code to figure that out. But I think that instead of trying to read through the code and trying to understand it, what I wanted to do and what I was doing before the stream is I was looking at the tests. So if we look at this test, if you set a debounce with a non-positive value, so here they're setting it as 0, but I imagine if you set it negative, then it should synchronize immediately. And so we can see they're checking that address.control value is the same value as, value. Here they're adding a 1 millisecond debounce to it. And in that case, then they set the they set that control to be the address. They expect the control value to update immediately, but they expect the street value to be empty. And then they set a timeout, which drains the microtask queue and all of that stuff. And then they expect the value to have updated. So then, they're checking, like, if you touch a field, and here, if we've got an empty function, then it should update immediately. Here, so they're debouncing with an empty function. And here they've got forever. Where are they defining forever? I mean, I know what the intent of forever is, but I'm trying to figure out where forever is defined. But So here, it's never going to debounce after a promise resolves. So then there, okay, so that's the promise and the resolve. Did I miss forever in here? I didn't. I'm not sure where that's coming from. We've got our promise and our resolve. So they return the promise, and then they resolve the promise here, and then we expect it to update immediately. So we can do some stronger debouncing, which is very cool to be able to debounce like that, and get, to be able to, with these, we can most recently return promise resolves. If value is directly set before it resolves, that's fine. Oh, it should debounce it should inherit debounce from parent. That's cool. So if you set a debounce on the form, debounce address 1, and the address street is part of address. That's cool. You can override an inherited debounce. That makes sense. You should not affect a parent's debounce. That's a good test. Should not affect a sibling's debounce. Another good test. Should apply the last debounce rule. Okay, so here's what we were talking about, right? So they set a debounce of 1 and then a debounce of 0, and they expect it right away. So these two debounces conflict with each other, but the most recent debounce is the one that wins. That makes sense. And this is I don't expect to see debounce, but what I do expect is maybe you've got schema 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you might have conflicting debounces in those schemas. That makes sense. That, bringing two schemas together, you could accidentally have multiple debounce. Oh, it's defined on line 395. Thank you for that, Yo Halternet. Keep on calling you Johanderson. Keep wanna calling you. Let's take a look at what Michael just sent through. Go ahead and copy that. Custom control guide. Very cool. This doc's PR work in progress goes over how field works on custom form control. So let's see here. How about instead of we, man, I can't English right now. How about instead of we? So this guide assumes familiarity with signal forms essentials. Let's start with a minimal implementation. Implement the form value control in the field. Yeah, so here's the default. Checkbox style control needs two things: form checkbox control interface, so the field directive will recognize it as a form control, provide a checked model signal. So here, basic toggle implements form checkbox control. Checked equals model this. So that's actually a really good one. I'm keeping this in my GitHub lists down here. So here is the control itself. So implements form checkbox control. And in the case of a checkbox control, you have a checked and a toggle. And then we've got a button, and on click it toggles. That's fine. And then you can use it by adding the field directive to it. That makes sense. The field directive works identically for custom controls and built-in inputs. Signal Forms treats them the same, validation runs, state updates, all of that. Now that you've seen custom controls in action, let's explore how to integrate with the Signal Forms. Basic input, basic toggle, form checkbox control. Controls implementing form checkbox control must not have a value property. So both form value control and form checkbox control extend form UI control, a base interface that provides optional properties for integrating with form state, like disabled. Oh, this is so good. This is what I was looking for before. These tables, touched and dirty, errors, invalid, like all the stuff that we can, that it will automatically interact with for us. And so we can add these properties, and Angular will just automatically bind them. So the field directive detects which interface your control implements and automatically binds the appropriate signals. So here we've got field. When you bind field, it gives user form name. The field directive detects that you're implementing form value control, binds value to your value, binds form state signals disabled and errors to your control's optional input signals. Updates occur automatically. So here, I don't see where they created the custom, but yeah, the minimal controls shown above work. They don't respond to form state. You can add optional input signals to make your controls react to disabled state, display validation. Okay. So they're using ng model and they're binding disabled here. They aren't using the field binding with disabled. And then they're using disabled stuff here. Perfect. And yeah, these will be automatically connected through the field. As a result, you can control with validation and state management. Yep, perfect. Yeah, required an email, and all of that stuff's just going to work. When a user types an invalid email, the field directive automatically updates invalid and errors, so you can deal with those. Most of the state properties use input, read only, use model for touched. When your control updates it on your user, the touched properly uniquely supports model input or output ref, depending on your needs. Okay, so this is good. This is really good clarification. So you should use input to the form for any of these properties up here that it's going to automatically bind for you. But what it's saying is that the use model for touched when your control updates it on the user interface. So touched is special in that you could want to change touched from your control, but you may also want to get touched from, the Angular model, from the signal form itself. So you can use model or input or output ref, right? Output ref being the old school output decorator, and input and model being the newer pieces that handle, you don't have to do output refs or anything like that. So value controls sometimes display values differently than the form model stores them. A date picker might display this while storing this, or a currency input might show this while storing this. Use computed signals to transform the model value for display and handle input events to parse user input through storage format. This is really good. I like this line because I wanted to build a date picker on purpose. Well, of course I'm going to build it on purpose, but I wanted to build one because I wanted to explore what needed to happen here. This call out gives us a good idea of what needs to happen, and is something we're going to go through. So you can see here that the currency input is a number, but the display value, they use computed. And so you wind up with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is very much American, or a lot of places will swap the decimal and the separator. So this isn't very cultural specific, but it shows very, very well what we're doing. Yeah, it's using a comma specifically here. Handle input. So when we get stuff there, so on the class itself, we have to handle the input. We have to parse it to a float, and then we have to update the value ourselves. Bind display value to your templates display, like ng model, and use handle input to convert user. Yeah. So we can see that they're setting up the display value and handle input, and those two values are then being used to show the value to the user. And once a new input event happens, it's using handle input to update the model on the value. Validation integration, which is really, really cool because min and max and min length, max length, and pattern can all be used. And we've done this before. We stumbled onto it accidentally, but this is very, very cool. Don't implement validation logic in your control. Yep, that's a really good call out here. And unfortunately, we don't have the parts that yeah. Stateful input. I may have been off about the passer thing as I look at this. I don't know. I'm watching on form over a kid's movie. Yeah, it's a good Sunday morning. Spend some time with your kids watching a movie with them. Luckily, my kids are a bit older, so like my youngest is into anime. So watched a bunch of anime with her, which is, I won't even say that. Like when my kids were really, really young, I loved Phineas and Ferb, and Bluey is actually pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of good kid stuff out there, right? So I won't even say, but I do enjoy watching Death Note probably more than I would enjoy watching Bluey. So oh no. Okay. It's just telling me my mic was muted when I was making sound before the stream started. So last week, I was getting around 20 to 30% packet drop, and my upload speeds at the end of the stream were sub 1 kilobit. So I ended the stream, did all the stuff I needed to do to end the stream, and then called my ISP. And by that point in time, all of my speeds were back to normal. And they're like, "Oh, your speeds are back to normal. We can't do anything." I'm like, "Well, go look at the logs. You guys can see I was dropping a ton of packets." They're like, "Oh, what, are you using any services?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm using services to stream." "Oh, it's their fault." It's like, no, it's not their fault. So I'm very, very, I'm watching my I'm watching my meters closely right now just to make sure that when it happens, I capture it. If it starts happening, and I'm expecting it to happen because it's happened fairly regularly as I've been streaming, I will probably end the stream immediately, call them up, and be like, "Look," um, and see what they do about it. So just a heads up about that. I may have to drop really fast and be like, "Fix this," right? Um, or maybe I'll have to go back to a different ISP. We'll see. Really, Boku Daki ga Inai Machi. You, so yeah, I'm always looking for really good anime. Um, and you know, the Hunter x Hunter, the Chimera Ants arc, man, I hated it, but I also loved it. And the reason I loved it was for the way it ended, and I don't want to spoil it if people haven't seen it. But Hunter x Hunter's Chimera Ants, the way that arc ended, um, as a father with daughters, and just the way that one ended was it was touching. And Akame ga Kill was another one that was pretty good. And I know I'm butchering Japanese pronunciation. I'm very American that way. Like I can do Latin languages really, really well, but as soon as I get outside of Latin languages, I'm gonna butcher it, and I apologize for that. I try, but to me, the way things sound is probably different than the way they're said. But I'm always looking for good anime suggestions. I enjoy darker anime that has some thought behind it. So I enjoyed Death Note. Um, I need to watch the rest of I need to watch the rest of ReZero. So for Boku Dake, does that stream on Crunchyroll or is that on one of the other streaming services? Yeah, like yep, they'll treat, yeah. And specifically, when I went to go sign up with this ISP, I told them I'm a streamer. I stream on Sundays for 2 hours. I may start streaming during the week. Um, are you guys going to penalize me for uploading data? They're like, how much data are you talking about? I'm like 6 kilobits per second. Oh no, as long as you're not maxing out your pipe and blah 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 for like 24 hours straight. I haven't been that close, but it's on Crunchyroll. I need to get a Crunchyroll account is what because to finish ReZero, I need a Crunchyroll account. There's a couple others that I want to watch that are on Crunchyroll. I just watched Frieren. It's called Erased in English. Okay. Yeah, I watch I don't watch subs, I watch dubs. Um and the one that convinced me of that the best um was it was Demon Hunter. Um the voicing for the main character, I like the English actor way better than I like the Japanese actor, and that's probably going to get me in a lot of trouble. But I really enjoyed that one. The Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Um, Man, I hope they finish that one. I just finished watching that. You know where they've gotten to in that series, and man, that's another touching series. To the whole point of that one is the main character Frieren is an elf, and her lifespan compared to humans is basically eternal. Um, and she's been around for forever, and so she has trouble understanding humans because humans have so many feelings and they live for so little time, um, and she was an adventurer who went on an adventure with a very very famous party, and all of her party's dead except for the dwarf that went with them, and he's really really old, and she still looks like the day they left. Um, and the story follows her as she experiences, um, dealing with her feelings and stuff. It's really really good. I'm not doing it justice. It's an amazing anime. Really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna have to go take a look at Erased. You'll alternate. Thank you for the suggestion there, and you definitely sniped me there. I do think there are a lot of amazing anime out there that come in unexpected packages. So I'll have to check that one out for sure. Um, anyway, it looks like the pass through stuff, they haven't said anything about it yet, Michael. I appreciate you taking a look at that. I also appreciate you sharing this, because this is some more really good documentation that we can use as we go through this. I'm getting the hiccups right now, and I apologize. Anyway, we've cleaned everything up. Yeah. So I want to get back to where we were at the end of last stream. And at the end of the last stream, we added this defer, right? This giant defer. And yeah, I think as they're getting closer and closer to release, they're realizing that once they release version 21, there are going to be a lot of people who completely ignore the fact that signal forms are experimental, and they're going to experience a bunch of complaints, I think, um, and so they're documenting a whole bunch of stuff, and I really appreciate you finding and sharing that stuff, Michael. Michael passes on just amazing stuff to me all the time. I'm in a really busy time at work right now. I'm trying to build some consensus around around some stuff that I'm doing, and there's the tough thing about building consensus is, everybody's all over the board, and so when you when you get to a level where people start looking at how do you build consensus and things like that, it becomes it's a much more difficult subject. The way I typically go about building consensus, and this is like as soon as you start getting like senior or anything, whatever your company calls above a senior developer, you're going to have to start building consensus. So like at a senior developer role, the consensus you're going to be building is usually with your team, your manager, maybe the product side of the house, right? Your consensus stops there. As soon as you get above senior, you start to build consensus across teams. You may have to build consensus at VP levels or C-suite levels or things like that. And you'll find that people have very strong opinions. And sometimes those opinions are based on misinformation, is a good way to put it, a polite way to put it. Sometimes those opinions are based on tradition. And sometimes those opinions are just very, very strongly held opinions, and both opinions are valid, right? And so how do you go about building consensus when everybody's opinion is all over the board? And some opinions are very, very self-centered. Some opinions are strategic. Some opinions, right, like all over the board. And how do you build a consensus without devolving into like Game of Thrones style political battles? And that's what I'm working through right now. the consensus I want to build, I don't want to beat people over the head with opinions. I don't want to come in and be like, hey, you have to do this. I'm trying to acknowledge the current state versus, future state, and how do we apply governance to a process that hasn't been governed and people don't want to be governed, and right, like all of this stuff. Um, and it can feel very overwhelming at times, even if you have experience doing it. Just all of the term that my manager likes to use is swirl. All the swirl around it, and you can easily chase your tail forever in situations like this. So how do you get out of situations like that? My first suggestion for you, and this advice applies to everybody who wants to level up their career. If you want to level up your career, especially right now in the AI world we live in, leveling up your career, the soft skills are becoming more and more important. The technical skills need to be there, and quite often are a very, very important part of, hey, the AI made a mess, or hey, the person who was babysitting the AI didn't understand the intricacies, right? So technical skills are always very important, but the soft skills become more important. So understanding how to communicate with others without causing them to dig in. And sometimes the way that we word things can force people to dig in. And I've been reading some stuff from some very, very influential diplomats. So like Ben Franklin, Henry Kissinger, right? Those are very influential American diplomats, and I've been reading, their thoughts on the subject matter. Ben Franklin removed all forms of negative speech from his public speech speaking, so he wouldn't contradict people. And so that kind of gets into like the Socratic method, that gets into Stoicism, and ideas like that. And one of the interesting things that I find I do a lot more now is a lot more philosophy. I spend a lot more time thinking about why people hold the positions that they hold, and what those positions mean. And I spend a lot less time trying to change people's opinions, but instead trying to bring people to see my opinions. And so, first of all, learning to phrase things in a way that's not going to cause people to dig in. And that doesn't mean that you are not, that doesn't mean that you're giving in to everybody else's will. It means that you're recognizing their opinion and you're trying to get them to see yours. It doesn't mean that you have to come to their level or anything like that. And it's a very, very, for me, it's very tricky. And it's something that I'm having to work on to learn well. The next thing that you have to do is, once you can get people to start talking to you and seeing your opinions, now you've got to start to take stock of the landscape and see where everybody can agree. Because if we can start from a position where we agree and add to that, it's always easier than trying to get people to abandon, their beliefs or whatever. And so building that framework where everybody agrees, and then building a framework where we can add to what everybody agrees to. Man, it's a lot of work for me. So yeah. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Goodbye. Don't care about cheap viewers, my friend. Oftentimes people won't even consider your opinion if they don't feel theirs is being acknowledged. 100% Johanderson. 100%. That's correct. Every single time. As soon as you devalue or invalidate somebody else's opinion or position, um, well, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but most people turn off, right? They stop listening to what you're saying and they start digging in and they start cherry picking examples that weaken your position because you weakened theirs. So you're totally correct there. I always try to give my opinion last so I can communicate if taking into consideration what everyone else said. And that's a good way to handle it. Very it's a very powerful way to be. Um, I tend to have to lead meetings, and um, so giving my opinion last is often not possible. My opinion often has to come first because we're going to be discussing that. But I agree with you, and the way I would rephrase that is it's always better to remain silent and be thought dumb than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Or I think the quote is, "It's always better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." And the way I look at that piece of advice, right? I don't even know who that's attributed to. I should probably know. But the way I look at that piece of advice is it's always better to listen more um, and talk less, because people are going to tell you where they're coming from if you listen. Um, if if you go in and they say something and you're constantly trying to resolve their doubts, they're just going to shut down because they're going to be like, well, that person's not listening to what I'm saying. Instead, anytime I say something, they're trying to fix it for me. Um, and so, when you're trying to gather consensus across a broad spectrum, it's always better to listen to what people say. And then the next step that I try to do, if I have to formulate my opinion first and then listen, as people state arguments against my opinion, the next step that I like to do in that case is, after somebody's spoken, um, and if I agree or disagree, what I like to do is I like to say, like, say Johanderson's just given me an opinion. I like to say, okay, Johanderson, do you mind if I restate your opinion to see if I understand it? And everybody's going to be like, no, no, go ahead. And so then I try to restate their opinion from the way that I understand it. Um, and then if they agree, then they'll be like, yeah, that's what I said. If they don't agree, then they're going to correct nuances that I missed, which is why I like that step of, hey, can I restate it so that I understand it? I restate what I understood. They'll correct nuances. Once we both understand it, then if I disagree or if I see a weakness, I'm going to ask about pieces of what they said. I don't want to attack it, right? But in an argument where, hey, reactive forms are better than template-driven forms, right? My point of view is I like template-driven forms. They like reactive forms, and then we talk, and I restate, hey, so if I understand it, the reason you like reactive forms better is reactive forms allows you to control the validation. You can react to the form validation, and they're like, yeah, that's it. And maybe they provide some more nuance, but I was like, then we asked, well, do template forms give that same validation through syntactical sugar? Like, for example, debouncing forms. And then we can start talking about why I think, template-driven forms are better. But I'm not directly attacking their position. Instead, we're using the Socratic method to create a thought experiment where, and I'm coming up with this example off the top of my head, but the idea of the Socratic method is you don't directly attack the idea. Instead, you and we go on a journey to figure out, we have a thought experiment together. What happens in this case? What happens in this case? And most people respond to that okay. A lot of people hate it because they see questioning as directly attacking them. When people feel like you're attacking them, you're probably doing it wrong. What you want is to bring people along on a journey where both sides are thinking. If instead what you're doing is you're poking at where they're wrong, it's going to come across that way. So yeah. Reactive forms just doesn't make sense after signals showed up. Well, that's fair. That's 100% fair, Ole. Signal forms is still experimental though, right? So it's really, really tough for me to take, a giant company and say, hey, you need to build your entire strategy on top of an experimental Angular feature that's still under active development, right? For my own personal projects, for my streams, 100% I'm going to use signal forms, and absolutely I'm going to say, hey, if you're doing your personal stuff, you should do signal forms. Don't even worry about the other two, right? However, when it comes to massive companies and stuff like that, you have to be very, very careful in that opinion. We got to get this bit pinned on both the Angular subs. It's like a passive self-realization. Instead of correcting them, help them see whatever you want by themselves. There's some nuance to that too, right? Because you do want them to see what you want. You want to shine a light on that, but you don't want to force. Because it's entirely possible that I'm wrong. And reactive forms are better than, template-driven forms. It's entirely possible. That's the point of coming to a consensus and things like that. It's not to get everybody to do what I want. It's instead, can we agree on something? And is that something going to solve the problem at the scale we need to solve it at? That's the approach you have to take. And I've been successful at this. I've been unsuccessful at it. And I'm still learning a lot about it. And I spend a lot of time reading philosophy, reading psychology, reading different topics like that have nothing to do with writing code but more to understand why I think the way I think, why others might think the way that they think, and how can I encourage better communication, and how can I encourage cooperation and things like that. And that's kind of why I take the approach of calling myself, a code philosopher now. The craftsmanship and stuff, I've been working on that my entire career. Hopefully I'm able to craft code in a good way. But now I want the philosophy. Why are we doing that? And is our reason for doing it that way good enough? Or should we investigate other reasons? And, what is the morality of my choices? And what is the moral framework that we're using to judge the morality of the choices that we're making, and things like that? And do I see problems with those, and how do we address those problems and things like that? It gets much deeper than signal forms versus reactive forms versus template driven, and it's a different place to be. But if you want your career to go beyond senior developer, junior, mid-level, senior developer, those are the kinds of skills that become super important. You know, even as an IC, as an individual contributor, you know, who isn't going into management and things like that. Collaboration and consensus are two of the topics that you're always going to be judged on as you get higher and higher into organizations. So the more practice you can get in now, the better off you'll be. And I 100% think that right now, with the way the AI is, understanding how to come to a consensus is going to be way more important than, you know, code correctness or whatever. Yeah. Let's get back into the defer. I'm not even sure how I sniped myself with that one. But at the end of the last stream, when we started having problems, the Ole, but you need to think later how you are going to migrate from reactive forms to signal forms. I think it will be easier to migrate from template-driven forms. That's a so my biases are going to show here, but you're totally correct, Ole. Well, from my biased point of view, I will admit I am super weak at reactive forms. Why am I weak at reactive forms? Because I haven't done reactive forms, because I haven't liked reactive forms, right? And so from my biased point of view, I think you're 100% correct, and everybody should agree with Ole. I do think that it will be easier to migrate from template-driven versus reactive, but reactive also has some of the stuff that signals are bringing, right? The signal forms, I think, is taking the best from both worlds. And so a reactive forms-based person might say the same thing from their point of view. And I agree with you, Ole. There's some nuances here too. In what you're talking about, there's a big, as you get into leadership, how much are you prescriptive about versus how much do you allow freedom to handle, right? And this comes down to what you're saying. Don't use reactive forms anymore. Yes, I agree with you there, Ole. Don't use reactive forms. Please don't take this out of context, right? But no. There are a lot of teams who have done amazing things with reactive forms. I'm just not a fan, and I have a lot of reasons for that. But you know, when you're talking about consensus and things like that, you need to be careful about not being too prescriptive, because you could paint your teams into a corner. And sometimes you need to allow your engineering teams to do what they do best, which is solve problems. You know, engineering teams are amazing at solving problems. So, you know, sometimes you just let them solve problems and you worry about, the bigger picture. So yeah, man, there's so many nuances here, and we could talk about this forever. And one of the things I've been thinking about is just reaching out to some people in the community and maybe just creating a panel and just being like, hey, let's do a Q&A and just allow people to come in and ask about, ask questions about things like this. I think it would be fun to do. But let's get back to the code for a bit. I really want to get past where we are. And one of the things we have to do is be able to hide this form. Right now, our form only shows up, well, our defer doesn't do anything. So if we go here, and let's pop open our network tab. Now let's reload our page, right? So we can see that we get the base document and things like that. But what we're not going to see is our defer is not deferring the loading of this component. And the reason it's not deferring the loading of this component is an important nuance to understand. Defer only works on like standalone components. And the way defer works is that when it encounters a standalone component, it creates a hole in the DOM that it waits for when it needs to load that standalone component. So us wrapping pure HTML here doesn't work. So the first thing we need to do to get this defer to work, and we can compare what we see here, right? Like, wait, why do I have no response for this? There's 192. Oh, these are 0-byte responses. Weird. Wait, why are these 0 bytes? So there's that one. There's our main.js bundle. I think our main.js, yeah, so it includes all of this stuff. So like, the other thing that defer is going to give us is it's going to pull a lot of this stuff out of our main bundle. So we can see here, here's our random custom control. Here is our star input and things like that. So down here, these are 0-byte responses because it already got them in the main bundle. So let's fix this up, right? So the first thing we can do to defer this loading is we can actually make a form, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So in our components, let's add a new NX component. Well, it's an Angular component. We're going to use NX to generate it, right? So Angular component. This is going to be our to-do form component. So we can see here that it's going to create our to-do form and all of the stuff that we want. And it is a standalone component, so defer will work. Our change detection, I always make this on push. And there have been discussions about making on push the default, but that breaks older Angular stuff. And so at some point this will probably happen, but until it does, it is what it is. We have to pick it, right? If you're not using Tailwind, then I recommend that you always check this. It's going to make your components always have they're always going to have they're going to take up space in the DOM. They're going to be a block level element, right? Export default, that's up to you. Inline style, inline template. The reason I do inline style and inline template is because it encourages me to refactor into smaller stuff. No module because we're standalone. We're going to leave all this alone. Our selector we're going to leave alone. We're not going to skip any of this style CSS because we're using Tailwind. But you could default to SCSS if you use it. We could add component here, right? And this really comes down to personal preference. There are good arguments both ways, and that's why NX allows you to, have a type here. I'm going to leave it default. view encapsulation, again, I don't mess with it, but you can do shadow DOM or like emulate it as a default. None basically means you've got no encapsulation, so all styles will apply. If you find yourself using ngDeep a lot, maybe you intend to use none. But yeah, this is what we'll do. So we'll generate this. And then we're going to need to do some stuff with it, right? So here's our to-do form. Right now, there's not a whole lot to it. Let's go ahead and commit this form before we do anything to it. So, boom. So there we go. We'll push that. And I'm watching. So one of the other things that I'm watching is I'm curious, like, as my family gets home and they jump on the Wi-Fi, is that potentially causing the issue? So they just got home, so I'm curious about what's going on. So let's go into our to-do component and let's grab this entire form. So there we go. So there's our defer, and we're going to bring in our app dash, what do we call it? To-do form here. So there's our to-do form. But right now it's not really doing much for us. So let's go ahead and bring that in here. Boom. And now we're going to have to clean up a bunch of stuff because notice here we aren't referring to a whole bunch of things. However, I want them here. Oh, so we've already got input, projected input. Yep. So let's go ahead and add the rest of the stuff here. So we had that one, we had that one, we had that one. So really the only one we needed to import was field. But notice that our form is no longer good. And if we look up here, we've got our stores, but our form exists here. We don't need it to exist here. So let's bring this over. We're going to move this into our form also. So here on our form, we want this. So our form is going to have a model, and we need to import form from Angular form signals. Boom. That should clean this up. So now to do, oh. That's an interesting one. For right now, like, I don't want to pass the form in and create the form here because it doesn't make sense. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to add this here and we're going to move that there. So now our error summary is part of our form. It's no longer part of our to-do. And now if we go take a look, our form is still here. It still behaves as we expect it to. And we're still getting our errors. But now our errors also show up below the form to just show that, hey, we're getting our errors outside of the actual form itself. So that's all in place. Everything's working as expected. However, if we go take a look at our network and we refresh, one of the things we should see right away is that our main.js so we got our field set. What is this? This is the app input. I guess it's being bundled because our defer's not really doing anything for us. So one of the things we could do here is the next piece that I wanted to do was we need to pass into the to-do form what it's editing. Right now, what it's editing is hard-coded. And we don't want that. So like form.id, we're basically just getting, if we look at our to-do model, we're getting the basic to-do factory, right? We don't want that. And in fact, we're using to-do factory here. What we want instead is a way to, well, actually, let's first commit before we tear this apart too much. So take the stuff that we moved, and we'll commit that. Yeah, why is the form inside of a defer? The reason the form is inside of a defer is because right now the form is really just kind of useless. Right now the form sits inside of a well, the form is just it's the default state, but it doesn't represent what we see here. So when we click here, instead of putting this up on the screen, what we would like to do is have it show up down here. And then, we could add save and cancel and stuff to it. So let's do that. So what's the best way to go about doing that versus, there are a bunch of ways we could do it. One of the ways we could do it is, we could have the handle click set a value inside of to do that then we pass into the form. That's one way we could do it. I think the better way to do it is to use the to do model, or no, the store. So the to-do list store currently only has the to-do list factory in it. Right? It's got its with state. Let's add some stuff to that to make it so that we've got some other things. So one of the things we could do is we could add right here, we could add with state, and here we could add an object here that is selected state, and selected state right now we'll just leave it as undefined. And what we could do is we could have a type, and we could call it selected state equals, and on our type, it would have selected state, and our selected state is, and if we look at our to-do list factory is a to-do list, And a to-do list is an array of, let's go take a look at our to-do list model. So our to-do list infers the to-do list parser. Our to-do list parser is an object, and that object has to-dos, and that's an array of to-do parsers, and that's, you know, just an array of to-do items. Right, so our to-do model, so it's an array of to-do models. So in our to-do list store here, this could be a to-do model or undefined. So here we could say with state and selected state. So boom. So now we've got a selected state here. And now what we could do, you know what, we're going to leave it as undefined for right now. And inside of our to-do, now the defer makes sense because now we can wrap our defer in an if. So now we can say if store dot selected state, then we have our app to do form. And so at this point, instead of alerting, what we can do is we need to be able to update our store with the selected state. So let's bring this over. And here we can go with methods. Let's bring that in. And so we want some methods here. And it's a function that returns some other functions. And at this point, we want to do an updater. And this is okay. But this isn't how we want to do it, right? Select to do, and to do is going to be a type of to do model. So we've got our to do, and here what we want to do is we want to update our state. And it's been a while since I've done this, so let's go look it up together, right? Michael's probably dying inside. He's like, why can't you remember how to do this? It's like, it's been a while, dude. So in Signals, inside of Signals store, updating the state. And I know it's just a simple function, and then we pass in an updater. So book search store inject with state. We've got computed values here. And that's one thing that we should probably do. Because right now our to-do is based on a truthy check here. What we should do is we want to compute it. So with computed and state, and we're going to return some state here. And so in our computed, and we want to do selected, and this is going to be a computed. And here we're just going to take a function, and then yeah, for right now we'll use that. And so now we can update our here, instead of selected state, we can say, hey, to do selected. Why would we do this? Well, one of the big reasons why we're doing it, and I'm being a bit lazy right now. Typically, I like to use like an optional monad or something like that. And if we want to change to an optional monad, right, where instead of to do model, we would do maybe to do model, right? Then a computed would allow us to make that change easily. So for right now, we're doing a truthy check, but in the future, by having a computed, that's going to help us out. Did you know that Michael beat Chow's team at NGConf in charades? No, I didn't know that. That's awesome. That's bragging rights. That was fun. What were you guys having to do, like charades for Angular concepts? Is that what you were trying to do charades for? Because that sounds like it would be amazing. Let's go back. Defining store methods. So update query, patch state. Patch state, that's what I'm looking for. And then with patch state, what you can do is you can create these methods that allow you to patch the state. We're going to use mutative to help with this. So select to do, we're going to patch state. And we're going to bring in patch state. There we go. And we're going to do state. And actually, we don't even need to do that because and the other thing we can do is we can say, hey, this is with, is it immutable state? I need to go take a look because I did bring in that library. I need to find the library. Inject dispatch. Where did we do that? That's mutative. There we go. Yeah, with immutable state. So we can bring that in from Angular Architects. And that's going to guarantee that our state is immutable. And what does that mean? With immutable state basically means that we won't... Oh, did I not bring that in? Or did I spell it wrong? Thought I spelled it right, but... And... let's see if I can find the import for this. So import with immutable state from, and it's Angular dash architects. Oh, do I not have that as part of my project? ERX toolkit, I swear oh, it's at Angular Architects. Let's try that. I thought I brought it in early on. Angular dash architects. No, I didn't. Well, let's bring that in then. So here, we're going to do, let's see here. To install this, oh man, I was expecting an ng add. But this is easy enough. So we're going to remove unused imports. Yes, I will. And then we're going to add this. Well, there's a video. I need to watch that video. Charades with words, but can't say the thing. And then the last round, they had an organizer who didn't do Angular come up with a literal translation of a thing, and you had to guess what they meant. Oh, wow. We aren't that fancy to have an add script yet, but we have considered schematics for potential future change. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Michael. I'm really surprised that I hadn't added this because I thought I had already added it. But let's now go back, and now I should be able to say Angular Architect / NGRX Toolkit. Boom. And the NGRX Toolkit is really cool, you guys. But with immutable state is one of my favorites. Because it's going to force my state to be immutable, and I can't mutate my state. One thing, we're talking about doing a cancel. And let's do it the way I've got it right now. And then we'll talk about doing the cancel, right? So here, instead of alerting, what we're going to do is we're going to say this.store.select to do, right? So there we go. So now our store is set up to select to-dos, and people who are paying attention are going to notice that I didn't do something that I typically don't do. But notice that our form is not here. And if we go take a look at our main bundle, our main bundle is a bit smaller, and it should, in the response, it should be missing some of the stuff. Oh, wait. So our app input is still here. That's interesting that it's getting bundled that way. I'm curious why that's the case. We'd probably have to dig into it. But the reason I put the defer on it is that when I click one of these, it shows up, but it's not showing up with the right value. It's just showing up with whatever's in there, right? Whatever the default is. And the reason for that is that we didn't add an input to our form. So here on our to-do list store, in our to-do list form, there are a couple of ways we could do this. One of the ways we could do it is on our app to do, we could, have to do equals store dot, whatever. The other way that we can do it is we can recognize that this form is always going to be tied to a store that has a selected to do in it or a to do in it. And so we can just say, hey, let's go ahead and just inject our store. So we'll inject our to-do list store. And this is the way I typically do it. I like to limit the amount of inputs. So here we can just say read only. to-do list store equals inject. And then here we can do to-do list store. Boom, and let's grab our inject. Oh, I thought I'd already imported to-do list store. So there we go. So now we've got our store injected. And then here, our to-do model, instead of being a factory, we can say, hey, it's this dot to-do list store dot selected. Did I call it selected state? I did. That's kind of dumb. Let's do this instead. Selected to do. There we go. Selected to do here. You could absolutely do this with, you could have an input here that is the to-do list and the selected to do, and that could be your input on it. I tend to do it here. Oh, this may not work. This may not work. Because if I select this, we'll see that we got that one, but here, let's say this one is not done and it's not updating. However, if we go back here, let's add another HR. And then here, we add a pre that is our store dot selected to do to JSON. That's fine. So let's refresh this. So here we've got the one that's true, but here we're false, right? And so we've got an issue here where we aren't updating. So here we're learn signal forms, the top one. This one is learn Angular ARIA, and we're still stuck on explain factories. So there's an issue going on with this one. And the issue is that we're based on the value of our form. So what I'm doing here in this to-do list form doesn't work. It's not a good way to do it. So what we can do is we can go with our to-do factory here. And that's fine. We can start with that. The next thing we want to do is we want to add our constructor. And inside of our constructor, we want to say on after next render. So after we get our next render, we need a function inside of here. So after our next render, we want to do something. And what we want to do is we want to say, hey, we want an effect. And our effect is going to be based on, say const current to do equals this dot to do list store dot selected to do. So now we've set up a subscription between our current to do and our to do list store, and then we can say, hey, this dot form dot can I not set the value of the form? And we would have to do this regardless of if we came in through an input or not. Are you getting stream freezing, Ole? Yeah, runtime errors to yell at attempted mutations. I'm showing that I'm not dropping any packets right now. It was only once. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually showing 0 packet drop, and I'm showing good. Oh, I'm actually over by a little bit. Let's get this done, and then I need to end. I need to get packed for tomorrow, so I can make my flight. But yeah, we would have to do this regardless. What I'm curious about is setting the value of the form. Can I not set the value of the entire form? Yeah, no problem. I've been enjoying today's stream. I'm trying to handle submit. So the profile form signal gives you access to the field state, which includes the form's value. Can I not do this dot form? I mean, it's saying patch value, but that doesn't exist. Form dot value dot set current to do. Boom. So there we go. That should allow us to, so if I pick this one, we got our done. Wait, done true. So our selected form is showing up here, but we're still getting the factory value. But why am I trying to go about it in such a random way? Why am I, how about we just do this dot model dot set and current to do. Why am I trying to jump through so many hoops? That's just that's a perfect example of can't see the forest for the trees, right? I was too focused on the form. I was just being silly. So here, wait. Is this effect not working? So let's get console up. Oh. Oh, this also explains why, because I'm using HMR, the defer blocks are loaded eagerly. That explains that. But my effect isn't running because I have it inside of a next render. And what I can do is down here, I can inject. And so it needs to be run inside of an injection context. So injection or injector. Is that not going to work? So effect takes in the effect function and the options. And we just need to pass in an injector so that it runs in an injection context. I think it's just injector. Yeah. There we go. So that should fix that problem. So that recompiled. Now if we refresh this, you know what, I'm trying to be too cute with this because we're running inside of an SSR, right? We're running with SSR. But I don't really need to be because this stuff, there's nothing here that interacts with the DOM. So I don't need to be that cute. So if I pick this one, there we go. So now if I swap to ID2, we see that it's ID2. And we swap to ID0, we see it's ID0. What we want to do is, like, if I uncheck this, notice, right? We don't have a way to save this. So our save and cancel can do two different things. So let's get the save and cancel. Well, yeah, let's get the save and cancel in, and then we'll call the stream. One of the things I want to do, the table from TANStack table. We can put TANStack table in instead of what we've got now, and then we're really, really close on this. So we've got our store, we've injected our store, we've got an effect that's watching the store. If we did this with an input, it would still be a model input, and so we would either need to do changes or we would do an effect on the model. So regardless of the direction we went, whether we inject the store or we go with an input, if you want this to be more generally useful, you would, I mean, we could do the same thing, right? Instead of injecting the store, what we would do instead is we would have a, for the form, we could have form value equals model, and here we import that from Angular core, and this would be to do model, and so boom, and then down here, instead of using that, we would use form value. Oops, yeah, no, it'd just be form value. And form value is probably a bad name. So instead of form value, we could just say, hey, let's call this selected to do. And in doing it this way, then our selected to do becomes our to do form becomes much more reusable. So if we go about it the signal store way that we were doing it before, then our signal store, then our form becomes bound, like coupled to that signal store. If we do it this way, then our to do form can be added in other places. But you'll see that doing it the same, I mean, the code's basically the same, right? We can see that our code is basically the same. And so now we need to add the cancel and save. Cancel and save. Let's save the cancel and save for next time. And then we'll get into the table. The cancel, I want to dig into the cancel is pretty easy. We can add the cancel button pretty easily. So on our to do form, on our to do form, we can just add after the form, we can add, well, here we could do button type equals button. And this is our cancel button. And our click equals, cancel. So down here, we just add our protected cancel. And then the other thing we can do is we can add our update or we can say edit canceled equals output and we'll import that from Angular core. And then we can just say, hey, this dot edit cancel dot emit, boom. And then in our to-dos, we can just add our edit cancel. And that is not what we want to do. Instead, we're going to say handle canceled. And we're doing this one because it's easy to do. So we just do protected handle cancel. And our handle canceled just does, and we need to go into the store itself. We're going to add a cancel method. So we're going to say, yeah, that works. We'll just add a deselect. So this dot store dot deselect to do, boom. Oh, I said handled. I was like, wait, that should all work. That should all work. But no, it works if you name it the proper thing. And so now, if we bring this up, we're great. If we click cancel, we go away. One thing we should do is on this button, this is going to have a class equals button. So there we go, and there we go. We're gonna have to do some cleanup here because our button right now is small because it's fitting into this column. So one thing we could do is potentially just add a div that would push this over, but we'll fix that up next time. Right now, we just have the ability to open one and cancel. We're going to want to move our submit and cancel buttons over to this side of the form anyway. So we'll get that figured out next time. But as of right now, we can move between these and we've got a cancel in place. The reason I'm saving the save for next time is because we need to update this table and we're going to have to do it in an immutable way. And I want to talk about how we're going to do that. But yeah, thank you everybody for being here. Luckily, it looks like the stream went, I didn't have issues today, so maybe, who knows what was happening. But I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Until then, you guys have a good week. And, reach out if you guys